Hey guys, Miss Farron here. Welcome to our new unit. We're going to look at Unit 9, Notes 1 today. We're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about an inverse variation. So here's kind of a little blurb at the top of your notes here. The number of revolutions of a pedals made when riding a bicycle at a constant speed varies inversely as the gear ratio of the bicycle. In other words, as the gear ratio decreases, the revolutions per minute increases. This is why shifting to a lower gear allows you to pedal with less difficulty when riding uphill. So basically, when you switch your gear into low gears, your wheel is going to churn more. And because these are doing opposite things, that tells us that they vary inversely. So an inverse variation, y varies inversely as x if there is some non-zero constant k such that x times y equals k. Basically what you need to know is when we talk about inverse variations, inverse means as one goes up, the other one is going to go down. So let's look at this first example here. The time t it takes to travel a certain distance varies inversely as the rate r at which you travel. The equation r times t equals 250 can be used to represent a person driving 250 miles. Complete the table and draw a graph of the relation. So we know that this is an inverse variation because the slower you drive, the longer it's going to take you to get there, or vice versa. The faster we drive, the lower time it's going to take us to get there. So as one is increasing, the other one is decreasing, which is going to tell us that inverse piece. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use this table that I'm given and the equation that I'm given, and we're going to plug in the values for our r variable, which is what we know. We know r. We're going to plug in r in this equation. So first thing I have is 5. That's going in for r. So I'm going to do 5 times t is going to equal 250. So I'm going to solve this by dividing by 5. And I'm going to get that t is going to equal 50. So if I drive 5 miles per hour the entire way, it's going to take me 50 hours to get 250 miles. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that for 10. So 10 times t is going to equal 250. Divide by 10. So t is going to be 25. So the faster I go, the less time it's going to take me. Plug in 15. And I'm going to get that t is going to equal 16.666. So I'm going to do 16.7. So we're going to keep going. 20 times t is going to equal 250. Divide by 20, so t is going to be 12.5. You can keep writing out that work and getting the answers. If I plug in 25, I'm going to get 10. Plug in 30, you're going to get 8.3. 35, 7.1. 40, 6.3. 45, 5.6. And 50, I'm going to get 5. So now we're just going to go ahead and we're going to graph this. R is the same thing as my x, and t is the same thing as my y. So I'm going to go over 5, and then up 50, and I'm going to plot that first point. I'm going to go over 10 and up 25, plot that point. Over 15, up 16.7, so it's a little bit past 15. Over 20, up 12.5. 25, up to 10. 30, up to 8.3. 35, up to 7.1. 40, up to 6.3. 5.6 at 45, and 5. So it's going to make kind of like this exponential decay. We've seen this shape, so it kind of gives us part of that when we're looking at an inverse variation. So let's look at example number 2 here. We want to graph an inverse variation equation in which y varies inversely as x when y equals 15 and x equals 6. So there's a couple steps that we need to follow when we're doing this. Our first step is we need to come up with an equation. Well, I know that varies inversely gives me the equation x times y equals k. And in the first example we did, we knew k. We knew what we were shooting for. We were shooting for 250. In this situation, we don't know k. So our first thing we have to do is we have to find k. So I know that x is going to be 6 and y is going to be 15, and that's going to equal my k value. So I found that 90 equals k. So the equation that we're going to be dealing with here is going to be x times y equals 90. So now our second step is we need to start using this table here. So we want to choose x values that are going to be divisible by 90, because I know that just like in that first example, I'm going to have to divide by 90 or divide by 90 by something, and I want it to be a whole number. So I want to figure out my x values, and they're going to be ones that are divisible by 90. Here's one thing that we're always going to do. Your middle term is always going to be a 0, because we want positive and negative values of this. So once I get my 0, I know that I need 4 numbers that are divisible by 90. So I'm going to start with 2, 3, 6, and 9. They could be any numbers divisible by 90. We just want to get whole numbers. That's our plan. So since 0 is there, we're going to use the same exact numbers except negative on the other side. So negative 2, negative 3, negative 6, negative 9. So that's our second step. Our third step is exactly what we did in that first example. We are to the point where we know our equation and we know our x values, so we can plug in the x values to find the y values. So we are going to use the equation x times y equals 90. Well, I know that I am going to have negative 9 times y equal to 90 then. When I divide that out, I know that y is negative 10. So that's going to be negative 10. Do the same thing. Negative 6y equals 90. Divide by negative 6. Y is going to give me negative 15. So I know that's negative 15. Plug in a negative 3. Negative 3y is going to equal 90. So y is going to equal negative 30. Negative 30. Plug in negative 2. So negative 2 times y is going to be 90, so y is going to be negative 45. So I get negative 45. Now we're going to plug in 0, so 0 times y is going to equal 90. So when I plug that into my calculator, 90 divided by 0, I get an error. We know that you cannot divide by 0. That's a thing that is not allowed in math, so we can't do that. So our 0 is always going to be undefined, U-N-D, undefined. So now the nice thing about using the positive and the negative same numbers is I'm going to get the same numbers, but they're going to be positive instead of negative. So underneath my negative 2, I had negative 45. So underneath 2, I'm going to have positive 45. Negative 3 was negative 30, so positive 3 is going to be positive 30. I'm going to get positive 15, positive 10. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to graph this situation here. My axes are not labeled, so I'm going to go ahead and I need to label them. So I know this is going to be my x and this is going to be y, and now I need to get my scaling going here. So my y values, I have to go all the way up from negative 10 to negative 45. So I need to make sure that I have enough room to get to negative 45. So I know that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines here, so I'm going to go by tens. So it's going to be negative 10, negative 20, negative 30, negative 40, negative 50. So then I'll go up by tens this way, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So now looking at my x values, I need to go from 2 to 9. So if I have 5 lines again, I can go by 2s. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And then negative 2, negative 4, negative 6, negative 8, negative 10. So we're going to go ahead and graph this. So I'm going to go negative 9, and I'm going to go negative 10 and plot that point. Negative 6 and negative 15. Negative 3 and negative 30. And then negative 2 and negative 45. So this is going to give me a little bit of a curved line here. You always want it to be curved. It's not straight. Now that undefined, we're going to come back to that. So we're going to skip the 0. So we're going to go 245, 330, 6, 15, and 9, 10. Again, this is going to give me a curved line. It eventually will level out, but it'll get really, really close to the axes and never actually touch them. And here's how I know that. That undefined that we get, when 0 is undefined, this thing right here, this is going to get, that means the undefined, that we don't ever cross that line. The graph will get really close to it, but it'll never actually cross that line. So let's go ahead and look at example number 3 here now. Same kind of idea. We're just going to follow this three steps that we have. Graph an inverse variation equation in which y varies inversely as x when y equals 12 and x equals 4. So step 1, remember, we have to find k. So to find k, we're going to use x times y equals k. We're going to plug in, we know x is 4 and y is 12. So I know that k is going to equal 48. So the equation I have is xy equals 48. So now the second thing we're going to do is we're going to plug in x values divisible by 48. So we're going to be divisible by 48. And again, that's just going to help me so my numbers are nice. So remember, middle number is always going to be 0. We want negatives and positives. Well, I know that I have a 2, 3, 4, and 8. And then I'm going to do the same numbers, only negative on the other side. Negative 4, negative 8. So now step number 3, our third step, is plug in x to find y. Plug in x values to find y values. So we would have this equation up here that we're using, x times y equals 48. So I'm going to have negative 8 times y equals 48. Divide that out. Y is going to be negative 6. Negative 4y equals 48. Divide that out. Y is going to be negative 12. Negative 3y equals 48. Y is going to be negative 16. Negative 2y equals 48. Y is going to be negative 24. Remember, our 0 is always going to give us an undefined. And then to round back over, we know that we just have the positive numbers instead of negative numbers. So now we're going to graph these. I have to go ahead and I have to do my x and y axes and then my scaling. My y's have to go from 6 to 24 now. So I'm going to go by 5. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And then same numbers, only negative on the bottom. Now my x's have to go from 2 to 8, so I should be okay to go by 2's again. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Now I want you to pause the video and graph this one on your own and then come back and check your answers. So you should have got a graph that looks something like this. Remember, we do not ever cross the axes, especially the y equals or x equals 0 axis, because we are undefined at that moment. If you have any questions on this one, come chat with me before moving on in the video.